So we are there. So yeah, it might just take a second just to settle actually, because I know I'm a little bit all over the place from having a last minute panic to be on time. So for me, if not for anyone else, I'm just going to take just a second, just have a couple of breaths and land in this space. Of course, we're all coming here with different stories from different backgrounds and different experiences. And it might be the first time that we've just stopped. And of course, we get this kind of surge of momentum. This mind is still kind of churning over. So for me, just taking a few little breaths, just deepening a couple of breaths in and out. It's just enough just to slow me down and feel a bit more settled. So as I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read the email this week, there's quite a lot in it this week because it's a big topic, and we'll go over it today as a whole, quite sort of an overview, and then we're going to use the next few sessions over the next however long to sort of go into the individual attitudes or principles of mindfulness, either as individual things or as pairs. But today's session really is about, I'm just going to mute the principles of mindfulness. And what I would like to cover is explaining what they are. There's no set standard for this. This is stuff that's come from John Kabat-Zinn, and he's one of the sort of fathers of modern Western mindfulness. I'd like to sort of explain how these attitudes relate to the practice of mindfulness itself, the meditation side, and then highlight how the benefits of mindfulness are closely linked to the cultivation of these attitudes. Because with mindfulness, we can often hear about these whole range of benefits, but it's like, well, how does that happen? Where do they come from? You know, all we're doing is sitting down and focusing on our breath. So it's quite important to sort of highlight that, you know, where do these benefits come from? So in terms of what they are and where they sit, the definition, as we've used before, the commonly accepted definition is knowing what is happening while it's happening without preference. So there's the three parts to it, and the first two parts are about our awareness. It's knowing what's happening while it's happening. And then the last, or the third part, is without preference. And this is where the attitude sits. So we could generally describe that attitude as kindness. But what we've got is these other 8 attitudes that sit under this banner of kindness. And we may be familiar with them, and some of them may seem a little bit obscure, but I'll do my best today to shine a light on how they relate to the practice. So they are non-striving, acceptance, patience, trust, letting go, a beginner's mind, and that one is the one a lot of people seem to wrestle with a little bit, non-judging, and gratitude. So these are like the pillars or the backbone of our attitudes. And it's important to remember that these aren't some lofty standard that we have to achieve in our practice, but it's something we may find helpful to notice and to cultivate. Now, if I just sort of go through each one, I'll sort of briefly go over each one, and then we'll go over the benefits and how they relate to it. And then we'll actually do a practice on this. And that'll help us to highlight, how we relate to these attitudes and where they are and how they fit in our lives. So quite a lot of angles going on here. So non-striving is probably easier to look at what striving is. And it's a term I use quite a lot in my practices, and it's kind of linked to what we did last time with perfectionism. So striving is this kind of attitude of reaching out of this moment, reaching out forward into the next thing as though that's the thing that's going to solve all our problems, or that next moment holds the secret to our peace and happiness, or whatever it is. And striving has a tendency to make us feel like we're not quite happy as we are, and that we have to earn our place in the world, that we're only valuable if we're being outwardly productive. And of course, that's exhausting. So non-striving allows things to be as they are, and things to move at their own pace. And how it's important in our practice is it brings us into this moment. It allows our attention to focus on what's happening now and not that next thing. So the mental energy of pursuing that, if we can lessen that energy, we have actually more energy to focus on what we're doing right now. And when we have energy, present energy, that gives us room for growth, creativity, space. So acceptance is another attitude, and I consider this our superpower. And it's something that we readily overlook. But I think I'm true in saying that if we don't accept something, then we can't move beyond it. We have to accept whatever it is before we can actually act or deal with it or move forward or beyond it. And quite often, I notice more in myself, is this unacceptance of how I feel. So there's resistance. There's resistance to feeling a certain way, maybe anxious or stressed. So I'm not accepting how I feel, and I'm spending a lot of energy pushing those feelings away. When I can recognize, so through awareness, recognize what I'm doing, and when I can then accept it, then that energy of resistance is freed up and allows us to focus on what we're doing. Again, sort of present moment awareness, space, creativity. And in the practice, acceptance, it comes in knowing that we're going to make mistakes, if you can call them those. We're going to feel like we're doing it wrong. That ties in nicely to patience. And I think patience has become something of a lost art in this day and age, where everything is instantly available. Entertainment at the tip of our fingers on our phone. Amazon Prime the next day. We're only ever 2 minutes away from a supermarket. And we don't have to wait for anything anymore. Yet we know that some of the most valuable things that we can do take time. Crafts and skills, and even the mindfulness practice. We may get immediate benefits from a single practice of relaxation, and we often find that, but sometimes we don't. But the benefits of the mindfulness practices are something that build up over time. They accrue over much sort of longer time spans than we're used to in this sort of modern age. So when we're patient, we actually, it's almost a bit like letting go. We're giving in to that waiting. We're saying, okay, it's going to come in its own time. And it's kind of linked to trust. And there's several kinds of trust. There's this trusting the process. We're trusting this process of learning, which is a bit of patience. We'll find that a lot of these attitudes are very much interlinked with one another, and they overlap and they touch, and they kind of sometimes mean the same thing. So in this process of learning, where we're trusting the process, we trust each other, and we trust our common humanity. We trust that in our sharing, especially at the end, that that we're giving, we're exposing ourselves in a way, we're exposing our experience, we're being honest, and we're trusting the people around us. And perhaps one of the most powerful forms of trust is when we direct it towards ourselves. And sometimes when we stop and we go inwards, quite a lot of stuff comes up, and sometimes it's not very nice. Sometimes it's things about our past. Sometimes it's things we wish we hadn't have done, wish we'd had done differently, stuff that was completely out of our control. So that form of trust is trusting that we are stronger than that. We're stronger than our past because of it. That we're here and we're capable of seeing it through. And letting go is another attitude. And this idea of letting go is, again, it's more that we subconsciously hold on to things often. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's deliberate. We either hold on to a good experience, and as it fades away and we experience that craving, or we hold on to something someone said that hurt us, and we hold on to experiences and bad memories for whatever reason. And sometimes we can replay those scenarios in the present moment, and the body can't tell the difference between what the mind is doing and what the present moment is doing. So we relive some of these past experiences again and again in the body because we can't let go. And letting go is one of these skills. It's linked to patience, because sometimes, yeah, you can let go and it feels great. Other times, it's just about loosening that grip just a tiny bit. Can I let go a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more? Because some things we hold on to, they're attached to our sense of self and our identity. And letting go is beautiful in the meditation, because each time we breathe, we have to let go of that breath before we can take the next one. And if we don't let go of the breath, we're not getting the next one. And we have to constantly let go of those trains of thought, those sticky thoughts that come along and we hook in, and then before we know it, we're somewhere else. And each time we come back to this moment, we're practicing that letting go. We let go and we return to the moment. And that skill of letting go and returning to the moment is something we can then learn to apply to other areas of our life as well. So we're onto beginner's mind, and that's perhaps the more abstract of these. So a beginner's mind is this attitude of not knowing. It's coming to our practice and our life with an empty cup. And I think through our insecurities, we often try and show people how full our cup is. This is how we feel like we get respected or noticed. It's telling people how great we are and you know, this and that and the next thing. And but what that does is it blocks us off from receiving anything new, because we already think we've got it sussed, or we're too involved to actually be open and learn from what's going on. So quite often it's called a beginner's mind, because when we start something new, we've usually got quite an open mind about it. But what happens over time as we become more identified with what we're doing, this path narrows and we become a bit more rigid, and we pick up all these beliefs and assumptions and whatever as we go along through experience. And then we live through those limitations. So we've collected a series of beliefs, and it's not our fault, this is stuff that happens. But then we filter the world through those beliefs as well. So a beginner's mind in the practice can be as simple as treating that next breath as though it's never happened, as though we've never breathed in before. And it sounds slightly vague, I appreciate that, but when we connect with that presence, it tells us stuff. It appears as sensation rather than this concept. So we've got non-judging and gratitude to go. And non-judging is, I think we've all got our own version of this, but judging is something that we slip into with ourselves so easily. And I know just from doing this with the people that I've done it with in the past, we really do beat ourselves up. We do. There's this, you know, evolutionary negativity bias that sort of, we tend to be prone to this self-criticism. So it's easy to judge ourselves, and certainly in a practice where we have these misconceptions that we're meant to empty the mind, and then as soon as thoughts come, as soon as distraction comes, we think we're doing it badly and we judge ourselves. But what judgment is actually doing, it's comparing this moment, this never happened before experience, it's comparing it to a fantasy, something how we think it should be, some, you know, mind-made version. And again, it's slipping the mind into concepts instead of into actual reality. So the power of non-judgment is a very powerful way to stop judging ourselves and stop judging other people. There's a quote by Louise Hay, and she said that we're all doing the best we can with what we've got in this moment. And we can bring that to ourselves, knowing that, you know, if we could do better than what we're doing, we would be doing it. You know, it's trusting ourselves. So there's all sorts of things going on subconsciously that might be affecting what's happening now. Lots of external influences that might be affecting what's happening now. And gratitude really is the last one. It's the state of being grateful, of focusing on what we do have, what is good. And another quote by John Kabat-Zinn again, he says, as long as we're breathing, then there's more right with us than wrong with us. So this speaks to this potential for, you know, this moment and the future, rather than being held back in past thoughts and thinking. And also a bit of a twist on the gratitude thing is thinking, you know what, as difficult as some of the things we might be facing is right now, something could happen tomorrow that makes today seem like a blessing. And we've probably all experienced some of these difficulties, and we look back at yesterday and go, oh my God, you know, was it the Beatles, isn't it, yesterday? So Gratitude is the opposite of entitledness or entitlement. It's the opposite of resentment. So we can see from these 8, and you've done well to stay with me so far, you can see from these 8 that they're all interlinked, they're interwoven, and at the center of this is mindfulness. But again, we're not expected to be perfect at these things. So I do just want to quickly go through what the benefits of mindfulness are, because if we know what the benefits are, then we're much more likely to come back and do it again. This can be, we might have our own motivation, but if we've got a clear understanding of some of the scientifically proven benefits of mindfulness, then it might help us to return to the seat, especially if we're struggling. So these are stress reduction, reduced rumination, boosts to working memory, improved focus, less emotional reactivity, more cognitive flexibility. It helps our relationships, help us appreciate our partners and friends. And then there's things like self-insight, morality, intuition, and anxiety and fear control. And these come about really by managing our mind, organizing our mind, and managing our focus. So our focus can be improved by being present. If our mind, if our hardware is already carrying so many other things, including judgments and concepts about what's happening, then we've got less memory to use in this moment. By practicing these sort of letting go, we're learning how to handle emotions a little bit better. So what we'll do is we'll get into the practice. We'll do a settling practice, which might take 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll go into the principles or attitudes practice. So it's just going to be one practice, but just letting you know how it's going to pan out. I think I need a drink of water before we begin. So lots of talking today. Thanks for listening.